I would characterise this year's federal budget as a bag of sugar and poison. It's not as bad as last year's, by far, but it's still unfair. I don't think it's sensibly funded, and it's not a good deal for Tasmania. When I say it's not the horror budget of last year, I'm being mindful of some of the positive measures that are included this time around. For example, the package for small businesses is good. We should help small businesses, and that will be particularly beneficial in a place like Tasmania, where small businesses are the backbone of our economy. Also, the move to better support people needing childcare is a good thing. We should be able to have ready access and affordable access to early childhood education, but not just to let mum or dad get back into the workforce, also because the evidence shows that early childhood education can be good for the young boys and girls involved. And also it was good to see the government confirm that it's not going ahead with the changes to the indexation for the age pension, which were announced in last year's budget and now have been dropped. They were very unfair. They would have resulted in a smaller age pension in real terms over time. Regrettably though, this year's budget does contain a number of undesirable measures. For example, the government still wants to cut back on family tax benefit Part B in ways that would hammer low-income families, and in particular single parents, most of whom are single mums. I mean, why would you go after people like that to save money for the budget? Surely these are just the sort of people that a budget should properly cater for, so they've got enough money to live a dignified life and to meet all the needs of their young children. But the government's intention to cut family tax benefit Part B is not the end of the story. And in fact, it's what was missing from this budget, which is just as important as what was included. And what was missing was much improved government pensions and payments for a whole raft of people in the community. The young, students, the unemployed, people on an age pension, they all need a better deal. And it's not just Australians that deserve a better deal, because our foreign development aid budget has been going down, down, down over recent years. And this budget sees another $1 billion cut. So a succession of governments seem to have abandoned the promise by Prime Minister John Howard 15 years ago that we would get our foreign aid to 0.7% of gross national income. It's now half of that and going down fast. But it's not just the most disadvantaged members of the community who don't get a fair deal in this year's budget, because the government now wants to stop people having access to two paid parental leave schemes. The government says they should have access to only one. But what about the 80,000 women out there who have forsaken salary increases so they could have an employer-paid parental leave scheme? And it's now enshrined in their workplace contract or agreement. Surely they should retain that benefit. After all, we know for sure that mums should have as long at home with their children as possible. So those 80,000 mums who are fortunate enough to have access to two different paid parental leave schemes so they can stay at home longer, surely they should be allowed to benefit from that and their children to benefit from that. So too, self-funded retirees don't get a fair deal in this budget, because this budget significantly reduces the assets that retirees are allowed to have while still getting a part age pension. The problem is the government's reduced that asset base too far, so much so that in this low return environment, these people on a part age pension will have to draw down their savings much too quickly. Apart from everything else, it's a disincentive to accumulating superannuation in the first place. There's not much good news in this budget for Tasmania in particular. I mean, for a start, anything that affects Australians broadly has a disproportionate effect in this state. We have lower incomes, higher unemployment, a more disadvantaged community. Our economy has more difficulties because we're an island. So any of the negative or undesirable measures in this budget will hit Tasmania even harder. Plus, where was the $400 million for the University of Tasmania to do the deep restructuring it desperately needs, which would help the community and help the economy? Where was the extra $60 million of federal funding so we can do the rail restructure in full instead of the half-baked restructure we're now going to get? So it's not a good deal for Tasmania. And I think that as people understand this budget more, as they get to understand the detail even greater, they will realise that it is an unfair budget, but it's particularly unfair for Tasmania. In closing, I'd like to say that this budget is unfair, but equally important is that this budget does next to nothing to remedy the real problem, and that is the shortage of revenue for the federal government. Now, yes, this budget does promise to collect a little more tax from some multinational companies, but it doesn't look within Australia at the ways the government could, in a fair way, collect more revenue. For example, it doesn't look at the big end of town and those companies that make super profits, like the banks, that could afford to pay more tax. And it dodges entirely the issue of superannuation and the need for reform there, because we are approaching the point where superannuation tax concessions will actually cost the federal budget more than the age pension. So let's stop demonising age pensioners and going after them. Let's look at others, including the superannuation industry and superannuants, and look at other ways to, in a fair way, collect more revenue. Quite frankly, rich people don't need a tax break on super.